A bus full of passengers was hanging precariously over the edge of a bridge, just seconds away from plunging into the river below. As everyone watched helplessly as tragedy unfolded, an ordinary office worker suddenly rushed forward and with his bare hands pulled the bus back. But strangely, immediately after saving everyone, all the money he had intended to use to buy a house vanished. Who was this man, and why did his money disappear every time he helped someone? This man's name was Sang-woong, an ordinary office worker. Today, he and his girlfriend Min-sook were looking at new apartments. They were so luxurious that they were both amazed. Min-sook particularly liked the 4-bedroom apartment, but the price was too high. In the end, they left disappointed. As an accounting manager, Min-sook always kept a very tight leash on Sang-woong's spending. Even buying a bicycle to save on transportation costs earned him a scolding from her. Unexpectedly, she suggested they temporarily stop dating. Sang-woong thought their relationship would end there, but it turned out Min-sook wanted to get married. They believed that if they registered their marriage, they would be eligible for a house purchase under the newlyweds program, with a much higher success rate than single people. The proposal was completely unexpected. Sang-woong initially refused, believing he should have been the one to propose first. Unexpectedly, he agreed because he was promised a brand new video game console. Min-sook even prepared the marriage registration papers. Just as Sang-woong was about to sign the registration, his father called, demanding he return home immediately. Upon arriving home, his father announced his retirement. It turned out his purpose in calling his son back was to hand over a family heirloom. He then squeezed Sang-woong's hand so hard it felt like a bone was about to break. Instantly, countless images of his family's ancestors flashed through Sang-woong's mind. His great-grandfather once single-handedly carried a giant log, effortlessly wiping out an entire bandit gang. His grandfather was a brilliant soldier during the anti-Japanese resistance, braving bombs and bullets to deliver messages and save comrades. At this moment, as his father released his grip, Sang-woong realized his hand had completely healed, as if it had never been broken. Thus, the ritual of passing on the family heirloom was complete, and he officially received the superpower passed down through generations. However, he still didn't understand what was happening, so his father grabbed a nail gun and fired 2 shots directly at his son's forehead. A moment later, the nails automatically fell out, and the wound on his forehead healed completely. But when he opened his wallet, Sang-woong almost cried on the spot because the small amount of money Min-sook had given him had vanished without a trace. It turned out that using this power required a price, and the more money spent, the greater the power received. Hearing this, Sang-woong couldn't feel happy at all. He immediately wanted to return his abilities on the spot. Being poor and having to spend money on superpowers was worse than not having them at all. However, his father explained that these abilities were passed down to secretly help people. He himself had been forced to receive them in the same way. Moreover, once received, they couldn't be returned. After saying this, he even gave him a business card from a loan shark, just in case he needed help in times of need. Sang-woong returned home dejectedly and recounted everything to Min-sook. Of course, she didn't believe him. To prove his point, Sang-woong borrowed some cash from her. He slipped the money into his pocket, then with very little force, bent a steel bar into an arc. Naturally, when he took the money out of his pocket, only a small portion remained. Min-sook immediately demanded that he perform several more tests, even trying different weights. After careful consideration, she concluded that renting machinery was far more economical than using his abilities. Therefore, she strictly forbade Sang-woong from using his superpowers, as they were still struggling to save money to buy a house. Others might be overjoyed to possess superpowers, but for Sang-woong, what he would gain wasn't superpowers, but poverty. From then on, he lived in constant vigilance, always moving quietly for fear of accidentally using force. If his girlfriend found out, he would surely be punished. Even when he saw an elderly woman carrying heavy bags, he would ignore her. At work, even when he saw others in need of help, he remained selfish, resulting in colleagues disliking him and complaining about his indifference. One day, he unexpectedly noticed unusual red rashes on Min-sook's hands, but he didn't pay much attention to it. Back home, Min-sook suddenly sold all her belongings to raise money to buy an apartment. With some money in hand, he went to buy a game console from a friend. However, on the way back, he witnessed a gang of thugs robbing his friend of the money he had just received. Sang-woong saw everything. Despite his guilty conscience, he ignored it and ran straight home. Meanwhile, the red rashes on Min-sook's hands became more numerous. Sang-woong was only 30 million won short of the down payment for the house. He didn't know how he would manage it when his mother unexpectedly visited and gave him a bundle of 30 million won, her life savings. She then announced she and her husband would be going on a trip to Spain. Hearing this, he was overjoyed and couldn't stop laughing. He immediately called Min-sook to share the good news. However, while he was talking to her, a horrific accident occurred before his eyes. A bus full of passengers was hanging precariously over the edge edge of a bridge, threatening to fall into the river at any moment. Standing on the bridge, clutching the money, he was caught in a fierce, internal struggle, unsure whether to save them or not. But the desperate screams for help made him decide. He immediately rushed to the back of the bus and pulled it back with all his might, saving all the passengers inside. And just like that, his 30 million won vanished in the blink of an eye. His dream of buying a house vanished into thin air. He stood there stunned, clutching the last remaining banknote in his hand, but at that moment he suddenly noticed that the red marks on his hand had disappeared without a trace. Elsewhere, a group of people were chasing a girl until they cornered her. Unexpectedly, she burst into laughter and rolled up her sleeves. Suddenly, her hands burst into flames, the fire transforming into iron bars that quickly dealt with the thugs. At that moment, the mastermind behind it all appeared. It was Anna, the girl's old enemy. She immediately channeled fire into her hands, intending to attack Anna, but an umbrella suddenly appeared, shielding Anna. Immediately afterward, water poured down from above, extinguishing the flames in her hands. Anna's men even sprayed her with fire extinguishers. Finally, her powers were sealed, and she was kidnapped. The girl with the fire-controlling ability, named Hwa Jin, has been missing for a week. Meanwhile, a short-haired girl named Eunmi and a lawyer named Hu In are desperately searching for Hwa Jin's whereabouts. Eunmi showed Hu In the viral video of Sang-woong single-handedly pulling a bus. Seeing the coins falling from Sang-woong's person, Hu In immediately recognized his true identity. He told Eunmi to go with him to pick Sang-woong up. At this point, Sang-woong was extremely dejected because, despite doing a good deed, he was still taken to the police station. He suddenly remembered the business card his father had given him. When he called the number on the card, the person who answered was Mrs. Jung, a loan shark. As soon as she learned he was Kang Dong's son, she seemed to recognize him instantly. Not long after, Sang-woong was released, but reporters swarmed the police station to hunt down the hero of the bus incident. Sang-woong was about to retreat when he was suddenly blocked by a group of gangsters. However, instead of causing trouble, they all bowed respectfully to him. It turned out they were all Mrs. Jung's henchmen. She guessed he was out of money and offered to drive him home. However, she then informed him that his father still owed her 3 billion won, including both principal and interest. Upon hearing this, Sang-woong immediately thought of running away, but before he could do anything, he was shot with a tranquilizer dart and passed out on the spot. Meanwhile, Anna arrived at a livestock company, but it was actually a secret base undergoing upgrades with incredibly advanced technology. This place housed a laboratory dedicated to researching and extracting superpower serums from mutants. Hwa Jin had been stripped of her superpowers and was now just an ordinary person. However, Dr. Lee stated that the serum was not yet ready for use because clinical trials were incomplete. Hearing this, Anna angrily slapped her repeatedly. Anna also learned of Sang-woong's existence. She believed that someone who had to use money to activate their superpowers was nothing to worry about. Therefore, she ordered her subordinates to experiment with the serum, aiming to squander all of Sang-woong's money and make him even poorer. Upon waking up, Sang-woong found himself surrounded by a gang of thugs. Mrs. Jung threw him a wad of money, wanting to personally verify whether he truly possessed superpowers. Sang-woong was quickly beaten by the gang, his arms and legs broken, his whole body bruised and battered, and he lay motionless. Just when they thought he was completely defeated, Sang-woong unexpectedly touched a wad of money, and immediately his limbs began to regenerate. Realizing the money had saved his life, Sang-woong carefully put the remaining money in his pocket and used only his own strength to fight the thugs. As a result, he was beaten even more severely. Unable to bear it any longer, he went berserk and threw a punch that sent one of them flying into the wall. However, that punch also consumed all his remaining money, leaving him exhausted and collapsing. Mrs. Jung then asked where his father was, but Sang-woong replied that he had gone to Spain for a vacation. Hearing this, she flew into a rage, muttering that his father had once promised to marry her, but ultimately broken his promise. She then demanded that Sang-woong pay off his father's debt. However, because he was dirt poor, she decided to give him a chance to pay off all his debts at once, marry her daughter. When her subordinate reported that Sang-woong already had a girlfriend, she became even more delighted, threatening that if he didn't marry her daughter, his life would never be peaceful again. Sang-woong suddenly picked up a leftover banknote from the ground. In a flash, he leaped out the window, landed in the car below, and frantically ran away. Mrs. Jung let him escape, knowing that if he ran out of money, he would eventually return. Upon arriving home, Sang-woong was confronted by Min-sook about his use of his powers, as the video of the incident was going viral on social media and she had seen it. Knowing he couldn't hide it any longer, he confessed that he had used his mother's 30 million won to save someone. Hearing this, Min-sook angrily stormed off and took a taxi straight home. Sang-woong hurried after her to explain, but at that moment, his house suddenly exploded. Still reeling from the shock, he saw a group of people in black appear and immediately assumed found they were Mrs. Jung's men coming to arrest him. Panicked, Sang-woong fled to his father's old house in the suburbs to escape. Meanwhile, the next day, Min-sook attended her best friend's wedding, unaware that Anna was secretly watching her from afar, intending to use her as bait to lure Sang-woong out. Shortly afterward, a series of terrifying explosions suddenly occurred in the hotel. Min-sook panicked, trying to escape, but everything was engulfed in flames. Just then, Sang-woong woke up, startled by the news of the fire on television, and suddenly remembered that Min-sook was also at the wedding. Unable to reach her by phone, he immediately sensed something was wrong and rushed out. Since he was in the suburbs, it would take a long time to get back to the city. So, Sang-woong immediately ran to the nearest bank and withdrew all of their savings for the house. After receiving the large sum of money, he immediately used his abilities and flew straight to the hotel. At that moment, a section of the ceiling was cracking and about to collapse on Min-sook. She thought her life would end there, but at the most critical moment, Sang-woong appeared just in time, using his strength to lift the entire section of ceiling and throw it aside. Min-sook, deeply moved, hugged Sang-woong and burst into tears. However, she suddenly remembered something important and immediately asked him where he got the money to use his abilities. When she learned that her boyfriend had withdrawn all of their savings for buying a house, Min-sook was so angry she couldn't speak. After punching through the wall to get everyone out, Sang-woong saw that his girlfriend was still angry with him, so he took out a marriage registration form and unexpectedly proposed to her. "If you agree, let's get married. We can buy a house on installments and pay it back later." However, the emotional proposal didn't last long before Anna's henchman suddenly appeared, holding 2 gas cylinders. Seeing his arm engulfed in flames, Sang-woong immediately realized this guy also possessed superpowers like himself. Seeing the opponent radiating killing intent and relentlessly approaching, Sang-woong quickly pushed Min-sook aside and charged into battle. But even after spending almost all his money, he couldn't even touch a finger of the man. Not only that, the man detonated the gas cylinders, creating a terrible explosion that sent Sang-woong flying. Seeing her lover about to die, Min-sook, disregarding everything, picked up a piece of concrete and threw it straight at him. The henchman immediately turned to attack both of them, but at that moment, a piano unexpectedly flew through the air, pinning him to the wall. It turned out Sang-woong had managed to grab a wad of money from the wedding gift box to use his powers one more time. However, after that attack, he collapsed from exhaustion. Amidst the raging flames, the two embraced, but at that moment, 2 masked figures emerged from the wall and gave Sang-woong a wad of money to recover. When he woke up, he found himself in a completely unfamiliar place. It turned out he had been taken to Uncle Hu-in's law office. There, he introduced Eun-mi, a girl with the ability to control objects with her mind. However, to use her superpowers, she had to constantly consume calories. As for Hu-in himself, he could walk through walls whenever he drank alcohol. They are the Korean Superpower Association and want to recruit Sang-woong to join their mission to protect the world. However, Sang-woong only wants to live a peaceful life, get married, and have children like everyone else. Seeing that he is still angry and confused, Min-sook quietly leaves. At this point, Hu-in reminds him that his house has been completely burned down. Furthermore, he reveals a terrifying truth: a mysterious group of mortals is currently targeting him. These people have everything from money and power to connections spanning government agencies, the police, and even criminal organizations. Their goal is to capture mutants like Sang-woong for research and to steal their abilities. The organization is led by Won-do and his daughter, Anna. Therefore, the further Sang-woong hides, the more they want him, as it makes it easier to carry out their plan. Hu-in advises Sang-woong to join their group to gather evidence and bring them to justice. Meanwhile, the police investigating the hotel fire discover a video recorded at the scene. Through this video, they learn that the hero who once saved the bus has once again used his extraordinary powers to save people in the fire. Afterward, Uncle Hu-in takes Sang-woong to the boxing ring to train his physical strength. He tells Sang-woong that if he lands a punch on him, he'll be sent home immediately. Sang-woong thought it would be easy, but he threw countless punches without landing a single hit. Frustrated, he used his superpowers, but even after spending 40,000 won, he still couldn't touch Uncle Hu-in. Uncle Hu-in told him not to rely on superpowers and to make himself stronger. From that day on, Sang-woong was determined to train hard. Early in the morning, he trained with Eun-mi before going to work. After overtime, he went to boxing practice with Uncle Hu-in. Even at home, he continued to practice on his own. Before long, his skills had successfully reached a new level. Therefore, Uncle Hu-in decided to give him his first mission. Sang-woong's mission was to help Uncle Hu-in get past the guards so he could infiltrate the criminal association's laboratory, destroy it, and steal all the research data. At the same time, Eun-mi brought gifts for Sang-woong. It was a pair of briefs that reached his armpits, with many pockets for stuffing money and a hood that looked exactly like those worn by thieves. purpose. The very next day, he used these 2 items to save someone. When he returned home, he still wore the hood and stood in the bathroom striking all sorts of cool poses. But just then, Min-sook unexpectedly discovered him, making him want to disappear into a hole in the ground out of sheer embarrassment. But this time, she didn't forbid him from spending money. When Sang-woong wondered why she was so generous today, she happily revealed that they had won a house purchase opportunity for newlyweds. She also boasted that she had just found a job with double the salary and would be interviewing tomorrow. Not only that, she gave him 300,000 won for training. Meanwhile, Anna was ordering Dr. Lee to inject another vial of superpower serum into the body of the henchman Sang-woong had beaten unconscious. Although she knew this could cost him his life, she wanted to experiment to see if someone could possess multiple superpowers at the same time. The next day, the 3 of them delivered coal to an old man living in a remote area. This old man was also a mutant and possessed the ability to see the future. Furthermore, he knew Sang-woong's father. Soon after, he began using his superpowers and uttering incredibly bizarre prophecies. Gold submerged in darkness would lose its luster, but if one sacrificed themselves for others, like throwing a coin down a well, the gold would regain its original brilliant light. Sang-woong hadn't even had time to understand the meaning of those words when the old man woke up, completely forgetting what he had just said. It turned out that the price for the ability to see the future was losing some of his past memories. Suddenly, the old man rushed outside and frantically told everyone to get inside immediately. At that moment, a gas cylinder flew from nowhere and exploded, creating a huge blast. Immediately afterward, a group of workers appeared out of nowhere, swarming and surrounding the 4 of them. Uncle Hu immediately told the other 3 to run away, while he would stay behind to hold off the attackers. Sang-woong ran for a while, then turned around and saw Uncle Hu struggling alone against a crowd. He couldn't bring himself to leave. Finally, he decided to call Mrs. Jung to borrow money. Although he knew she was frantically searching for his father, he realized she seemed to want him to do something for her. So, Sang-woong accepted the condition and declared that he would do anything as long as it earned him money. At this moment, not only Mrs. Jung, but also Min-sook was present at the office for a job interview with double the salary. Before Sang-woong could rush to Uncle Huan's rescue, all 3 were surrounded by a group of mercenaries, and Anna appeared shortly afterward. Upon seeing her, the old man immediately used his superpowers and declared that she would return sooner or later, and that she would be kicked out of her own home. Hearing this, Anna became furious and immediately fired at the old man. However, he survived. It turned out that Sang-woong had managed to block the bullet in time, even though he was stuffed with so much money that it was practically spilling out. Immediately, Eunmi used her telekinetic powers, while Sang-woong used his superhuman strength to engage in battle with the mercenaries. Suddenly, a car appeared from the sky and sped straight towards Sang-woong, forcing him to spend a lot of money to stop it. The attacker was none other than the mutant whom Sang-woong had severely injured in their previous encounter. Last time, the mutant possessed only one ability, yet Sang-woong struggled immensely to defeat him. This time, however, he had acquired a new ability, significantly increasing Sang-woong's chances of defeat. At this point, Sang-woong only had a few banknotes left, so he was forced to fly far away. Upon landing, he immediately plunged into a lake. The mutant quickly pursued him, but as soon as he entered the water, the flames engulfing his body were extinguished. Seizing the opportunity, Sang-woong unleashed a full-force attack. Just then, he noticed countless coins at the bottom of the lake, thrown in by people wishing for good fortune. Without hesitation, he grabbed a handful of coins, surfaced, and delivered a powerful knockout blow to the mutant. Witnessing this, Anna was furious. Just then, her father called and wanted to speak to Sang-woong directly. He declared that in this battle, the one with more money would win, and it was only a matter of time before victory came. According to him, a poor man like Sang-woong certainly wouldn't be able to resist for long. Then, he made an incredibly tempting offer, asking Sang-woong to sell his superpowers to him. Sang-woong could name any price because he possessed a huge fortune and had a lot of money. So the group temporarily stopped fighting to give Sang-woong time to think. Not long after, at the scene of the brawl between Sang-woong and the criminal association, the police found a promissory note at the bottom of the lake with Sang-woong's name on it. Thanks to this, they finally identified the mysterious hero they had been relentlessly searching for. Immediately, Sang-woong came under police scrutiny. Afterwards, he returned home. His parents were overjoyed to hear that their son had registered his marriage and kept urging them to hold a wedding quickly. However, Sang-woong was in no mood to discuss marriage at this time. He brought up the idea of selling his superpowers to his father. Hearing this, his father immediately warned him that those people were extremely dangerous and could harm him at any time. Not knowing what to do, Sang-woong decided to seek advice from Eunmi. He even deliberately waited in line for a long time to buy delicious pastries as a bribe for the little girl. Thanks to that conversation, Sang-woong learned that someone named Hwa Jin had had their superpowers stolen by them. Afterwards, the two secretly opened Uncle Hoo-in's safe and discovered a shocking truth. It turned out that even if superpowers were lost, they could still be inherited by their children. Sang-woong didn't want his future generations to suffer this fate of poverty. Inside the safe was a list detailing the selling prices of the superpowers of mutants. His own file was noted as possessing super strength and self-healing abilities, with a valuation of 1.3 billion won. Along with that was a comment that he lived in poverty, was greedy for money, and prone to betrayal. Sang-woong was furious, believing that Uncle Hoo-in dared to slander him, while he was completely unaware that Uncle Hoo-in had been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. After some thought, Sang-woong decided to call Old Man Wando to finalize the price for selling his superpowers at over 4 billion won. Without much hesitation, the old man immediately agreed. Afterward, Sang-woong took Min-sook on a date. He used his superpowers to lift her and fly to the tallest building so they could both admire the city view. Amidst the romantic scenery, he gave her the ring he had forgotten to give her during their previous proposal and said that everything was about to be all right. Hearing this, she felt both happy and uneasy. The next morning, Sang-woong went to work with the mindset of someone about to change their life, so he was cheerful and welcoming to everyone he met and everything he did. Today, a very handsome customer who had just returned from America came to register his residence. He even made a cryptic remark that he, like Sang-woong, was secretly changing the world. However, before Sang-woong could understand the meaning of that statement, the police suddenly arrived, forcing him to quickly flee before being taken to the station again. He conveniently grabbed someone else's delivery truck and sped straight to the location where the superpower trading took place at the laboratory. As soon as he reached the farm gate, Sang-woong saw Hoo-in waiting to stop him. The two were about to clash when Eun-mi unexpectedly threw a box across the road. She continued to use her superpowers to prevent Sang-woong from entering through the gate. In the distance, Mrs. Jung was also having her men monitor Sang-woong's every move and ordered her subordinates to prevent him from entering the place at all costs. Eun-mi bluntly criticized Hoo-in as a hypocrite, only jealous of the money others earned from selling superpowers. While the two were arguing, Sang-woong secretly climbed over the gate. Just then, Mrs. Jung's subordinate drove up to stop him, but accidentally knocked down the gate, allowing Sang-woong to dash inside. He was quickly taken deep into the farm's experimental area. Anna gestured for him to sit down on a chair with handcuffs. However, Sang-woong demanded that she bring the money first before proceeding with the transaction. Anna immediately had someone bring a large bag of money. Despite her constant mockery and sarcasm, Sang-woong remained unfazed. He sat down in the chair and accepted the deal, completely unaware that Anna had secretly ordered her henchmen to eliminate him immediately after acquiring his superpowers. Sang-woong's hands and feet were quickly restrained, while a giant drill slowly descended, preparing to bore straight into his brain. But at that critical moment, Uncle Hoo-in suddenly appeared in the control room, aimed his gun at Sang-woong, and pulled the trigger. At that moment, Uncle Hoo-in ordered Eun-mi outside to sabotage the electrical system. Instantly, all the lights in the laboratory went out. The bullet Uncle Hoo-in had just fired was stopped by his assistant using a bag of money. The bag was torn open and cash scattered everywhere. Sang-woong immediately grabbed a banknote and used his strength to break all the handcuffs and leg shackles. By the time the power was restored, he had dealt with all the guards. It turned out this was a plan Hoo-in had orchestrated beforehand. After the ceasefire agreement, the other side had been closely monitoring them, making it almost impossible to break into the laboratory undetected. Therefore, they decided to stage this charade. Sang-woong quickly punched open a safe and took all the research documents inside. Then the two of them set fire to the laboratory, gathered the money, and fled. However, the explosion and fire triggered the safety mechanism, causing all the automatic doors to slam shut simultaneously. The money bag got stuck under one of the doors. No matter how hard they tried to pull it out, they couldn't, so they had to leave it behind. As they ran outside, they found themselves surrounded by guards. But the money they had used to fight had just been used up in the burning of the laboratory. With no other choice, they blindly jumped out the window. Just then, Eun-mi arrived in her car to rescue them, and all three successfully escaped. Among the documents they brought back, they discovered that the criminals were preparing to launch a new business model based on illusions and dependence. More notably, it contained a letter addressed to Sang-woong, sent by Joe Nathan, the guest who had registered his residence that morning. That evening, Sang-woong sneaked into the office to find Joe Nathan's residence registration form. After obtaining the address, the three immediately broke into his house. However, the house was completely empty, with only a pair of binoculars left there. Looking through the binoculars, Sang-woong was horrified to see a group of people standing on the rooftop and jumping down one by one. Below, Jo-nathan stood in a pool of blood, smiling and waving at him. The next day, when Sang-woong arrived at work, he was immediately reprimanded by his superior and had 3 months' salary deducted for leaving early without permission. Shortly after, Sang-woong requested an additional half-day off because he had been summoned by the police. His boss was furious. Sang-woong and Hoo-in went to the police station for questioning. However, a veteran officer entered and stated that he knew exactly what they were investigating. He advised Sang-woong to stay away from the matter, otherwise he might end up in jail. It turned out that Officer Kwang was also a former member of the Superpower Association. However, when Sang-woong tried to ask for more information, Hoo-in remained silent and left. Meanwhile, the two sisters, Anna and Jo-nathan, seemed to dislike each other intensely. During a single meal, they had already exchanged insults dozens of times. At this point, their father appeared and asked his son what he was up to. He replied that he was deliberately trying to provoke Sang-woong, because with a chivalrous heart like Sang-woong's, he certainly wouldn't ignore injustice and would sooner or later seek revenge. Therefore, he had prepared a trap for Sang-woong to willingly fall into. Hearing this, the man was extremely pleased and praised him as truly his son. Immediately afterward, he handed over the laboratory that Anna was managing to Jo-nathan. Meanwhile, Hoo-in discovered that the group of people who jumped from the building earlier were victims of drug experiments on ordinary people involving superpowers conducted by a criminal organization. This drug's main effect was to cause extremely strong hallucinations and was currently being smuggled into nightclubs in the Gangnam area. Before they could complete their research and replicate the superpower drug to release it to the market, they had to stop that plan at all costs. That night, when Sang-woong returned home, he saw Min-sook scattering many things everywhere. It turned out she was choosing clothes and items for the wedding the next day, but Sang-woong had completely forgotten about this important matter. The next morning, before going to work, Min-sook reminded him to be at the meeting place before 7 p.m. After calculating the time, Sang-woong realized he had to quickly catch the woman smuggling drugs into the bar before 6 p.m. to make it on time. That night, Sang-woong and Eun-mi went to a nightclub in Gangnam. They had received a tip that someone would be carrying a red bag that night, so they immediately split up to search. A short while later, Sang-woong spotted a girl carrying a bag identical to the one in the provided photo, so he immediately chased after her. Unbeknownst to him, Jo-nathan was secretly observing his every move. It turned out the girl carrying the red bag was Dr. Lee from the lab. As soon as she saw him, she lunged at him like lightning, snatched his wallet, and mocked him for being so poor. After just a few exchanges, Sang-woong's suit was torn to shreds. Her speed was so incredible that he couldn't see clearly, so he closed his eyes to feel the wind. Unexpectedly, with a single punch, he landed a blow on her. Before she could get up, he grabbed the red bag and fled. However, as soon as he reached the dance floor, everyone in the nightclub received the same message. The red bag contained a rare item, and whoever got it would own it. In an instant, the entire crowd rushed towards Sang-woong to snatch the bag. Eun-mi tried to use her superpowers to make the bag fly high, but someone pushed her over. Sang-woong immediately flew up, clutching the bag tightly to his chest, determined not to let anyone steal it, because if the drugs inside fell into someone else's hands, everyone would die. The entire incident was witnessed by Jo-nathan and Dr. Lee from beginning to end. Meanwhile, both families were present at the meeting, but Sang-woong was still missing. Min-sook kept calling him, but he didn't answer. At the laboratory, Anna discovered that her younger brother was the one who had stolen all the superpower serum. At the same time, at the nightclub, Jo-nathan was directing his subordinates to prepare to arrest Sang-woong. However, before they could act, the police suddenly stormed in, surrounding the entire scene. Due to being trampled by the crowd for too long, Sang-woong fainted for a few minutes. When he woke up, he was horrified to see Officer Kwang standing right in front of him. He thought he was going to be arrested on the spot, but luckily, Uncle Hoo-in appeared out of nowhere, holding a bright red cloth, and used his superpowers to rescue them at the last minute. At the restaurant, both families patiently waited, but Sang-woong was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, making everyone happy, thinking he had finally arrived. But when the door opened, the person standing outside was Officer Kwang. The officer announced that Sang-woong was a suspect in a major case and requested his family's cooperation in the investigation. Hearing this, Min-sook flew into a rage and yelled directly at the police officer. Just then, Sang-woong arrived. Officer Kwang declared that he would prosecute the case to force him to stop. Min-sook was extremely worried about Sang-woong, but she coincidentally discovered his overdue debt notice for over 30 million won. Meanwhile, at the detention center, Jo-nathan arrived to mock Sang-woong. Seeing Sang-woong struggling at the police station, Jo-nathan decided to reveal a secret to him. He said that from the bus accident, the sale of the video game console, the documents in Hoo-in's safe, to Sang-woong being lured to the nightclub and then imprisoned there, everything was Jo-nathan's plan. Before leaving, Jo-nathan and threatened Min-sook and said that he would take Sang-woong out of the police station that afternoon to play with him. Outside, Min-sook noticed several suspicious men in black blatantly following her. Meanwhile, Sang-woong was being escorted into a car to be taken to another police station where the arrest warrant would be approved, but the officers in the car were all members of the anti-humanitarian society. He couldn't sit idly by, worried about Min-sook's safety, so he risked fighting back to escape. However, during the chaotic fight, a truck suddenly sped towards them, causing the car he was in to fall into the river. At that moment, one of the men slipped a banknote into his hand. This activated his superpowers, allowing him to escape and swim to shore. Meanwhile, Min-sook immediately called Mrs. Jung and declared that she was Sang-woong's collateral. Sure enough, Mrs. Jung's people immediately appeared to protect Min-sook from the men in black. As soon as he reached the shore, Sang-woong saw Anna and her two teammates waiting for him. She made a proposal, wanting Sang-woong to eliminate Jo-nathan. At the same time, she revealed that all the superpower extracts had been transferred to a bank in Kimhee. If Jo-nathan were to release this drug onto the market, the whole world would be in danger. Although not entirely trusting her, the group accepted the offer because it directly concerned world safety. However, to become a hero, Sang-woong needed a lot of money. Min-sook went to Mrs. Jung Pak's office and blackmailed her. It turned out that the head of Kimhee Bank, a branch of the criminal organization, was Mrs. Jung's former boss. It seemed that from the beginning, she approached Sang-woong with the intention of taking him there to seek revenge on her behalf. Min-sook threatened that if Mrs. Jung didn't pay 30 million won, she wouldn't let Sang-woong go. Finally, Mrs. Jung was forced to pay. Meanwhile, Officer Kwang, after piecing together all the clues, realized that everything was connected to the criminal organization, so he immediately ordered his subordinates to raid Kimhee Bank the next morning. They quickly headed straight to Kimhee Bank. Anna silently observed them from a distance and ordered her subordinates to capture all three immediately after they obtained the superpower extract and brought it outside. Uncle Hu handed over the key to his personal money box, and then the group was led straight to the safe area. Sang-woong approached the counter and calmly stated that he had come to borrow money. When he gave his name as Kang Sang-woong, the employee immediately secretly pressed a red button under the table. Immediately afterward, the alarm blared loudly and all the doors slammed shut. Eunmi calmly ate to replenish her calories, while Uncle Hu-in drank alcohol. All three were ready for this final battle. Uncle Hu-in immediately crawled inside the safe to retrieve the superpower extract, while Sang-woong, outside with the bag of money Min-sook had given him, dealt with each person one by one. Their plan this time was to lure Jo-nathan and Anna's faction into fighting each other. Meanwhile, Sang-woong's group secretly sneaked into the branch manager's office to descend into the secret basement to find the superpower extract, along with Uncle Hu-in. Eunmi, outside, saw Anna's people approaching, so she opened the door for them and immediately ran inside to support Sang-woong. While Anna's group was battling the soldiers, Sang-woong couldn't contact Uncle Hu-in. Immediately, he used his superpowers to blast a hole through the floor, creating a passage leading straight down to a secret cellar where he found Uncle Hu-in lying unconscious. Just then, Jo-nathan appeared and praised Sang-woong's abilities as VIP, but said he was too poor to use them. Mocking him, Sang-woong didn't know how to respond, as he only had a few coins left. He secretly gave Eunmi some candy so she could use her superpowers to steal the soldiers' weapons and ammunition. Just as Sang-woong was about to charge forward, Hu-in suddenly appeared and pushed him through the wall. Sang-woong turned around and discovered a mountain of money inside. Uncle Hu-in had noticed something unusual in the blueprints and found this hidden stash of money. Sang-woong punched through the wall and rushed out to fight Jo-nathan's men. Dr. Lee lunged forward but was knocked back by him. He was about to continue attacking Jo-nathan when he suddenly felt dizzy and disoriented. When he regained consciousness, he was handcuffed in Officer Kwang's car, and although he still had money in his hand, he couldn't use his powers. Seeing that he seemed easily controlled, Officer Kwang removed the handcuffs and released him because he had now returned to being a normal person. Meanwhile, Anna had obtained the superpower extract from the bank. Unexpectedly, the loan shark, along with a group of people, stormed in, had someone break down the wall, and pulled out a locked box that only she could open. Inside was a ledger recording the enormous debt that the chairman of the criminal association had borrowed from her father. She called him, demanding that he pay back every penny or she would not leave him alone. After losing his superpowers, Sang-woong returned to his hometown to ask his father for help. His father said that the ability disappeared because he used it too much. Sang-woong was desperate because he was poor, while his enemies were rich. His only advantage was his superpowers, but now that he'd lost them, what could he do? His father told him that true strength didn't come from money, but from protecting what mattered. When he realized that, his superpowers would return. Sang-woong dragged himself home, only to find Min-sook missing. Then, Jo-nathan Nathan called, taunting him and demanding a life for a life. Meanwhile, at the police station, Mr. Kwon kept glancing at his watch, his face full of worry. It turned out that on that day, just before Sang-woong was about to be murdered by Nathan, he had led his men to save him. His subordinates questioned why he let Sang-woong go, but he simply replied that Sang-woong was innocent. At this moment, while Sang-woong was worried about Min-sook, Dr. Lee suddenly appeared. After examining Sang-woong and discovering he had lost his superpowers, she intended to kill him. Just then, Eun-mi appeared, using a piece of broken glass to pin her against the wall. Immediately afterward, Uncle Woo-in suddenly appeared from behind and quickly dealt with her. After Sang-woong learned Min-sook's location, he intended to go there immediately, but was stopped, because in his current state, going there would be tantamount to walking into a death trap. However, Sang-woong remained determined that even without superpowers or money, he would still go to rescue the woman he loved. The next morning, Sang-woong went alone to the place where Min-sook was being held. He stood on the rooftop and let himself fall freely downwards. At this time, Eun-mi had also blended in with the workers. She turned around and met Uncle Woo-in. It turned out that yesterday he had deliberately said those things just to help Sang-woong become stronger. Sang-woong fell from a great height through the glass and straight into the statue in the middle of the hall. Just as his father had said, superpowers don't come from money, but from protecting those you love. A few seconds later, his limbs began to heal on their own. Sang-woong was exhausted when two teammates appeared to help. He handed over the soldiers to them and went to rescue Min-sook himself. Nathan realized Sang-woong had run out of money because he could no longer heal himself. Therefore, Nathan used Min-sook's life to force him to surrender his superpowers. If he refused, Nathan would immediately press the button to detonate the bomb on the girl he loved. While Sang-woong was still wondering what to do, Woo-in suddenly fell from the ceiling, lunging straight at Nathan. But very quickly, he managed to shoot Woo-in, seriously injuring him, and then pointed his gun at Min-sook. Sang-woo, despite being in immense pain, still managed to use all his strength to rush forward, embrace Nathan and push him into the elevator. Then he pressed the button to trap himself, Woo-in, and the bomb inside, leaving Min-sook outside crying out in despair. Finally, when the elevator reached a sufficient height, Sang-woong pressed the detonator button, and the bomb exploded with a loud bang. In the days that followed, the full truth about the criminal organization's drug with its side effects was revealed to the public. Sang-woong's sacrifice saved Nathan's life, but the criminal organization still existed. Uncle Woo-in received timely medical attention and survived. Min-sook was consumed by grief after Sang-woong's death. One day, Woo-in decided to reveal a secret. Officer Kwang was a mutant with the ability to reverse time. Min-sook begged him to help save Sang-woong, but he refused, citing the price of the time reversal ability as a sacrifice of the user's lifespan. However, Min-sook didn't care. She only wanted to save her lover. In the end, Officer Kwang agreed. He reversed time exactly 1 minute before Sang-woong activated the detonator. Min-sook rushed forward, using all her strength to pry open the elevator door just a little, then slipped some money into Sang-woong's hand. Thanks to this money, Sang-woong survived the explosion. But it not only saved Sang-woong's life, but also Nathan's. He struggled back home, but his father showed no concern for his son's life or death. On the contrary, he scorned and criticized him for being useless. Then he coldly handed Nathan's fate to Anna. When she fired a bullet, Dr. Lee, with just a sword, deflected it back at her. Seeing Anna dying, Nathan coldly fired another shot. After that, he went to find his father for revenge, but discovered that Mrs. Jung had taken him away. She said, "You won't die until you pay the money." At this point, Nathan had reached his limit. Although he survived, the explosion had severely injured him. Everything seemed to be spiraling out of control today. He recklessly ordered Dr. Lee to inject him with all of his superpower serum. However, as soon as the process was complete, he ruthlessly murdered his most loyal younger sister with a 180-degree neck twist to test his superpowers. When Sang-woong's group stormed the laboratory to find him, they found all the guards had been taken down and corpses lay scattered everywhere. Nathan now possessed a range of superpowers, from arson and telekinesis to superior physical strength. He went berserk, charging into the streets, destroying everything in his path, even dragging innocent people into the chaos. At that moment, Sang-woong rushed forward, shielding and saving the innocent civilians. Immediately, the two clashed, engaging in a deadly battle that plunged the entire neighborhood into darkness. Woo-in and Eun-mi also quickly rushed to help. Nathan knocked down a power pole, causing it to fall into the residential area, but Sang-woong quickly used his body to shield the innocent people. Meanwhile, Nathan continued to defeat both Woo-in and Eun-mi. Sang-woong, having run out of money, was crushed by a lamppost. Despite this, he still tried to provoke Nathan. Just when it seemed he was about to lose, the girl he had asked for help earlier threw him a piggy bank. Immediately afterward, the entire neighborhood threw money down and cheered loudly for Sang-woong, moving him to tears. Eun-mi and Uncle Hu and also received support from others. Eun-mi quickly replenished her calories and drank soju to regain her strength. Seeing the money raining down, Joe Nathan immediately attacked, but before he could strike, Eun-mi threw a rope and tightly bound his hands. Hu-in also emerged from the ground to restrain him. Sang-woong seized the opportunity to deliver a decisive blow, defeating his enemy. Not long after, the chairman of the Bama Corporation was exposed for all his crimes, from creating a slush fund to producing illegal substances, and faced justice. Thus, the criminal organization was neatly dealt with. Everyone returned to their normal lives. Sang-woong and Min-sook finally bought their dream house. Not only that, she also gave him a surprise gift, an ultrasound report. He was deeply moved. The film ends here. Thank you to all the young men and women who watched. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel to support us and follow our next exciting films. Goodbye and see you again.